I've heard statements like, I lost a friend to an accidental overdose. I lost my child to heroin. I lost my husband to painkillers. These statements are becoming more and more frequent. The drug epidemic, particularly opioids and heroin, continues to rise at incredible speed. A very dear friend of mine, Andi Timiner, directed the recently released extraordinary documentary film, Coming Clean, that weaves a compelling journey of understanding addiction through the eyes of those impacted, the medical and psychosocial researchers, as well as the continuous fight of some political leaders to change communities vis-a-vis the pharmaceutical companies that are benefiting from this crisis. This is a battle we all need to fight. Many of us have lost friends and relatives to addiction, but few of us have been brave enough to build a program that fosters healing. The organization featured today was started because a family was suffering and they wanted to prevent another family from experiencing that same loss and sadness. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, a podcast featuring interviews with nonprofit and social impact organizations under $10 million. My name is Laura Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. My hope is that you love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. Feel free to pass along any valuable information you hear today to others, and remember to send me the name of any organization you'd like featured at reachus@theintrinsicgroup.com. LIVE4LALI works to reduce stigma and prevent substance use disorder among individuals, families, and communities, and to minimize the overall health, legal, and social harms associated with substance use. LIVE4LALI focuses on 4 key areas: education, advocacy, peer-to-peer support, and harm reduction. I am so excited to introduce my guest today, co-founder and board co-chair Chelsea La Liberté Barnes and executive director Laura Fry. Please share your passion about LIVE4LALI and your deep connection and commitment and what led to your involvement. Chelsea, as co-founder, maybe you want to start and then we'll move to Laura. I'll just let our listeners know you're in the car, you're driving, so hopefully we won't have sound issues, but we'll do our best, and we're so happy you're here.
Thank you so much. Sorry, everybody listening, about the sound issues if you hear anything. I'm on a road trip with my family. We'll talk about self-care at some point during this call, I'm sure, but I started LIVE4LALI with my parents. And at my brother's Shiva, which in the Jewish faith is similar to a wake. At the time, all we could really do was sit and think about what happened. Like, what just happened to my brother? How do you wrap your head around a heroin overdose? It doesn't matter if you knew the person was using, if they were addicted, it doesn't matter what area of their spectrum it is. Yeah. It's horrific. My brother was a lovely person. He made friends very easily, and he was really smart and creative and charismatic. So my parents and I, when something like this happens to you, you don't care about anything else. Right. You just literally want this to never happen again to somebody else. So when my brother died in 2008, he was 20 years old. This was happening in communities silently all across the country with virtually no awareness and education. What we now think about as the opioid epidemic, we don't call it that. We call it an overdose epidemic because that's really what it is. Drugs and substance use have been happening since the dawn of man or woman. We are human beings and we use drugs. We do it every day. I did it with coffee and carbs just this morning. That said, we just wanted to learn more and understand what was happening. Never did we believe, 12 or 13 years later, that we were going to be a fully functional, operational incubator of sorts in our community, doing more than just talking about it. It was very much about, let's just try to talk about it and see what happens. And lo and behold, they needed us. The addiction treatment field needed us as much as we needed them, because we needed to be able to process and heal from the grief. And the way we did that was through LIVE4LALI. And so the beginnings were very humble. We started out with one Frisbee golf tournament that raised $7,000 for addiction treatment. And here we are today, around $750,000 operating budget, with so much to, stake our claim on. And we're really proud of that. But the epidemic is much worse now. So we saved a lot of lives, but we have a lot more to do. I'll turn it over to Laura, and she can share more about her journey, which is really remarkable too.
Chelsea, I so appreciate you sharing the story. I was so moved when I learned about it myself. And I just have a quick follow-up question. Tell me about the name, and then I want to move it to Laura.
Lali, my last name, Lala Berté, which you said so beautifully at the beginning, the intro. Thank you. The nickname is Lali. That was my brother's nickname for years. So, and again, we just wanted to do this in our own little town of Buffalo Grove, Illinois. Live for Lali. That's what we want people to do. Live because he couldn't. And
Yes.
that's really simply what it meant and what it still means today in a much broader sense.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful legacy. And I want to thank you on behalf of so many people who have benefited, and now including myself, as I have certainly had in my family and loved ones situations too. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Laura, Executive Director, share with us your passion.
I guess my journey with LIVE4LALI started 10 years ago when I found out that my eldest son, Alexander, another Alex, which is just one of the many synchronicities between all of us, I discovered that my Alex was an IV heroin user. My first response, like many of the parents and families that I've helped over the years, are like, heroin? Who does heroin?
Mm-hmm.
You know, isn't that only on like the west side of Chicago in the alleys and under the viaducts? You know, we were a suburban family. We've been in the same house for 30 years, very involved mother in every aspect of my boys' lives. And you're doing what? Heroin? I had no idea what to do or how to do it or where to go. So I Googled and I met Chelsea. I started volunteering. I became a naloxone educator and doing naloxone training. I was looking for an alternative peer support recovery program because I knew that my son would never appeal to the 12-step program. And I found Smart Recovery, and we've been doing Smart Recovery meetings ever since. And I've learned so much along the way. Back when my son was using heroin, I would find his supplies. I found his naloxone, and I would throw things out. I would break his syringes. I was a raving lunatic. Now I carry supplies in my car, and I stop people panhandling and say, you know, do you need supplies? Do you need naloxone? Do you need food? It's really been a very fast 10 years.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I can only imagine, as a parent myself, having gone through things and the experience, and you just touch the nerve of what that even begins to feel like when you have a child in pain that you cannot reach. You mentioned a few terms I want to go to, and I do want to focus a bit on harm reduction, just because I understand it as a trained social worker and having been in a public health arena for a long period of time. But I want to go to naloxone and the smart recovery piece, harm reduction, and then your own programming and things that LIVE4LALI offers.
So harm reduction has become a passion of not only mine personally, but of our organization. And harm reduction broadly is something that we all do every single day. If you get in your car and put on a seatbelt, you're practicing harm reduction. Are you expecting to have a fatal car accident? No. But we wear those just in case. We brush our teeth with fluoride just in case. It's not a new term. It's not a new thing. We've been doing it forever. So where does harm reduction come in the substance use field? And again, it's many, many different things, from giving people safe and clean supplies so that they do not pass on bloodborne pathogens. When we give out those clean supplies, it's not just the supplies, but it's giving people the dignity and the respect they deserve to make their own choices about their own bodies. Harm reduction does not condone nor condemn substance use. It helps people learn ways to be safe and treats them with the dignity and respect that all human beings deserve. That's what harm reduction is. It also includes distributing naloxone. Naloxone is a drug that reverses opioid overdose.
We were trained on Narcan when I did work in Massachusetts. So connect that for our listeners.
Narcan is a brand name. It is the nasal version of naloxone. Naloxone is the drug itself, kind of like Tylenol and acetaminophen.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay.
And it can and does reverse all opioid overdose. So everything from fentanyl to Norco to heroin to methadone. My feeling about that is if you are a human being and you encounter other human beings, I would like you to carry naloxone. You don't have to have someone in your house, in your family. My son has reversed an overdose in a parking lot of a Starbucks.
Wow.
I reversed 2 overdoses at the Forest Preserve when I was hiking. It can happen anywhere. And to be able to empower yourself to take someone from death to life like that, who wouldn't want to do that?
I'm a social worker too, so I think about systems and history and policy and all of that. We were trained to think about it as abstinent or not abstinent, clean and sober or quote unquote dirty, which I hate that word. If we want to build a society that's more inclusive, that's more representative, we have to be considering other alternatives, because guess what? The all or nothing isn't working. If it was working, we would not be seeing as many deaths as we would. We would not be having as many recurrences. We would not be seeing as many suicides. We would be in a different place.
And I think that, again, my dear friend, Andi Timmeter, who did the recent Coming Clean, articulates that beautifully in terms of the way it can impact your brain. And so we have to find other ways in, because drugs actually shifts the way our brain is thinking from the frontal cortex to the automatic, like, I need this because my body's craving this. And we have this in other areas of our life. We can get a headache if we don't have caffeine. I mean, I can go on, and you already just, I don't want to belabor the point, but I think it's such an important point.
Let's look at COVID, right? The ultimate harm reduction issue.
Yes.
Everything we do, from masks to washing hands, to standing 6 feet away, to not going to a grocery store if you don't need to. Those are harm reduction measures, and they're in place because why? The public health community knows that there's no possible way we can all live our lives without having these measures in place and getting everybody sick. Vaccines, harm reduction. Treatment, harm reduction. It's all harm reduction.
What I have seen time and again, when we meet people where they're at, when we meet them with love and compassion and no judgment, when we don't tell them what they have to do or what they're supposed to be doing, guess where they come? You know, we plant that seed, and 3 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, they come back to the people that didn't judge them and say, you know what? Can I talk about my options with you? Because I'm tired. You know, it's up to the individual.
Right.
Humans should have autonomy over their own bodies.
Right. And the motivation needs to be intrinsic. It needs to be internalized, even if it's the seed is planted externally. And you see this time and time again when someone, has to stop smoking because they've had a heart attack. They don't do it until they recognize that they want to change, not even because something's happened. Let's talk about smart recovery. Laura, you mentioned it in your opening.
It's one of my other passions. Smart Recovery is a nonprofit organization that was founded in California 26 years ago, actually. It stands for Self-Management and Recovery Training. It is a science-based program using cognitive behavior therapeutic techniques, rational emotive behavior techniques. It helps people figure out how to change any behavior that is negatively impacting their lives.
So share with me the programs that you offer. I know some are peer support, advocacy. I'd love for you to go through them so that our listeners know this is what Live4LALI offers.
Well, I will talk about the 3, and then Chelsea can talk about advocacy because she is our advocacy strategist. She is brilliant at it. But education, every pillar that we have, it's such a huge umbrella. We're educating right now. We offer harm reduction education. Stigma and language is a big passion of mine, trying to change the narrative out there in the public of how we look at people. And you'll notice I always say people first.
I want to highlight that because putting people first means that whatever the behavior is or whatever is going on for them is only one aspect of who they are. The person themselves are really at the core. I really appreciate the language shift.
I wasn't always like this. I didn't walk into this being this way, you know. We have to educate each other and our community and practice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even among our own team, you know, someone will slip and use the A word. And I'm
Yeah.
like, how else can we say that?
Okay, now
In
you have to
person,
tell our listeners, we all know, but you have to say the A word that we're not using.
oh, I cringe every time I say that, addict.
Again, it's about the person first who's
Yeah.
having a tough time or has a behavior or wants to change, or we need to be educated in order for individuals to be educated about themselves because they've heard that word, right? Thrown at
Right.
them. They've heard it as an identifier.
You could look at everything. In the old days, I would refer to someone as a schizophrenic. That was not the best way that I could term that. A
Yeah.
person with schizophrenia.
Yeah.
I have a son who has autism, and I would refer to him as an autistic. How not good that was of me. He is so much more than that, as is every person who uses substances or has an issue with, because not everybody who uses substances has a substance use disorder.
Right. That's a very good point.
Even educating people who use substances on how to look at their own substance use. Is it problematic? Is it chaotic? And helping navigate them through that. So that's education. Peer support. I feel that this is part of the reason why we are continuing to see people circle through in and out, in and out, in and out treatment, because this is one of the only diseases where you get 30 days. Do we tell someone with cancer, you know what, if this treatment doesn't work in 30 days, we're just going to kiss you goodbye? We see peer support and peer recovery coaches as filling some of those gaps. Because when people come out after 30 days, I'm sorry, but that is not a cure.
Right.
You still don't know how to live life. So peer support, going to meetings, engaging with a recovery coach, getting involved in a church if that's your thing, volunteering, service work is really big. Until we start to figure out ways to fill those gaps, I'm afraid that we're going to continue to see this just keep cycling through. Pre-COVID, we offered in-house multiple smart recovery meetings, both for someone trying to change a negative behavior or family and friends. We also did refuge recovery, which is a Buddhist-based 12-step program. We offer grief support, and we have an Angel Moms network. And we also are attempting to do a sibling group. We do have a very active online Facebook sibling group, and we've tried to expand that into an actual meeting.
It sounds like Live for Lali is flexible in its system. And what I mean by that is you're always growing and learning kind of what's new and what's working and trying it out. And the idea that you have both a smart recovery that you've adopted inside your organization as an offering, and then the Buddhist practice, which I don't know anything about. It sounds like there's flexibility in whatever program will work. You'll sort of take it on, try it out, and see if it fits for the culture and your population. And I think that's remarkable. And the sibling piece is just another example of that you're moving toward.
You know, we also give people connections to all of the AANA, Families Anonymous, because we can't dictate what someone's path should look like. I recommend people do everything and anything. See what fits, you know?
Right.
Take what you can, leave the rest. You can't have too many tools in your toolbox.
Right.
You're not going to build a house with just a hammer. So, you know, look at all the options.
I also want to highlight that you are filling such an important gap in the service delivery system from treatment to post-treatment. The way you exactly described it, and having that peer or that place to go to, or that connection or that grounding or that lifeline, whatever you want to call it, allows someone to know that they're not out there on their own. And it's just so, it's essential, I think, in any kind of recovery, but specifically in substance use.
The recovery support specialist realm has not been built up. There is no workforce infrastructure for
Right.
something like this. And it's so pivotal, almost more pivotal sometimes than a counselor, especially for those people who maybe don't want to talk to us social workies.
Yeah.
You know, there's cultural stigma with that. So I think that a part of it is we're finding out so many things as we go with this with substance use. And it was really encouraging to see how the new administration, President Biden, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, actually included building up a recovery workforce and
Yes.
harm reduction in their plan.
Yes.
We've never seen anything like that before. So for our field, it's a huge deal. And I just wanted to throw that in there because in order to do that, in order to pay people, you have to pay people to spend the time, train them well, give them technical assistance,
Supervise
and take
them.
care of them, supervise them and take care of them because they're in recovery too from all sorts of stuff. You know, everyone's in recovery from different things. And then they go out there and they're dealing with all sorts of cases. You don't know what's going to get thrown at you. And you need people there around the clock. And that just doesn't exist right now. So it's our hope that that will be built up over the coming years.
I so appreciate that. And I want to move into advocacy, which this sort of lends itself. But I had worked for years in public health in the HIV prevention realm in Massachusetts. And peer support was one of the key things. And you're exactly right, because you're often dealing with folks who've been through a similar journey, never the same, but a similar. And so they're much more accessible to the person who's just starting their journey or is coming back to their journey and figuring it out. And so you never know what's going to impact that individual. And I supervised a lot of peer programs and peer support individuals, and I adored them for the work that they were doing and continue to do to this day. And it's extremely hard work, because it's always reminders for them, right? And it's just, so I love what you're doing. I absolutely am behind it 100%. So I want to move to advocacy, Chelsea. So share with us that piece of Live for Lali.
Oh boy, advocacy is something we could talk about for another 2 hours. How do you advocate for someone? You know, there are different levels of advocacy, but the advocacy that we do is very much around public policy and social change. For one thing, it's a part of our mission. We want to end the war on drugs. We're going to say it bold and we're going to say it loudly. The war on drugs has no place in our society anymore. We're seeing all the cracks in the systems over the last year and a half, especially when you don't see something in front of you or you haven't experienced it yourself. It's really easy to say, well, wait, what do you mean the war on drugs? What's the problem? Shouldn't we be locking people up for using substances? I think we all know that that's not working. Okay. And that hasn't worked ever. We can go back in time to prohibition and the temperance movement, and even before that to other cultures, to see why that doesn't work very well. Because when you cage someone and you tell them you are now belittled to your actions and and the things that make you human, there is a huge problem with that. And we have a huge problem with that. So we are going to be pushing forward with any legislative effort at the state level here in Illinois or at the federal level that end the war on drugs. We want to see drugs decriminalized. There's a lot of data to support the fact that we don't need to be jailing people who use drugs, whether they have an addiction or not. Giving people the option to get an assessment and understand what's going on with them is even more effective than putting people in a cell,
of course,
and telling them they're bad and they're wrong. And what has that done? Well, that's created generations of people who believe certain things about themselves and about other people. That's why we think, oh, they should go to jail. That's like the first answer we give to people who are breaking the law. Like, okay, we're more complicated than that. So that's piece number one. Piece number two is we got to see more treatment access created. We have a huge problem in this country because the substance use treatment system is a cottage industry. It was created separately from the general medical industry. That's one of the huge reasons why we have a whole separate industry that has basically been built on profitability over people. And I'm not saying that treatment doesn't work, because I think we all know that it does. We have incredible science that tells us that substance use treatment works. There's great medicines, great therapeutic practices, great services, and other types of supports that are culturally competent and keywords evidence-based, meaning there's a lot of data to back that up. Oh, not everybody gets those services because
Right.
if you don't have great insurance, not everybody can get on telehealth and do a group session
Right.
on their smartphone because they don't have a smartphone. Not
Exactly.
everybody lives in a home where it's safe to do a therapeutic process all day, sitting there in front of Zoom with other people. And while we've morphed, right, we've morphed to the times, it's not 100% effective for everybody. So
Yeah.
we want to see more treatment and recovery and harm reduction services, just more services available generally.
And more
Somebody
access.
shouldn't have to drive, and more access. Yes, thank you. I was just going to say somebody shouldn't have to drive 45 minutes to see an addiction medicine provider just to get a prescription for a medication that's going to stop them from engaging in behaviors that could be dangerous for them. So we have to, and it's all about stigma, right? So we have to spend the time decluttering ourselves as a society from separating this issue out from other medical issues because it's just not working. The other piece of this is, we are a harm reduction organization and we want people to know where their local harm reduction organizations are. We need more of them. We need more mobile structures.
Yeah.
And there's also a type of service that is in 120 other countries called a safe consumption site. Now, this is going to be maybe a little controversial for people to listen to, but I don't care. It's okay. This is what advocacy is all about.
Yeah.
Safe consumption site is just what it sounds like. Take your drugs, you walk into a facility, and you can use them there. And if you overdose, somebody will be there to revive you. If you have an abscess or if you have any medical issue, there's a team of people there to help you. If you need a job, group of people there who can help you with job placement and training. In other countries that have these types of services, you see huge reductions in crime, huge reductions in overdose and the spread of illnesses like hepatitis C and HIV, which clearly you're very familiar with. Anything to do with these quote unquote consequences of drug use. We have to get with the program here as a country. And so we're going to be continuing to work on those pieces and continuing just to create access and support and love for people who are using drugs. Doesn't matter where they're at with that. We have bills that we've created that we've been a huge part of the entire bill process from the development of it to implementation of the bills. We have coalitions that we run. And we're listening and we're talking to legislators. There's not a week that goes by where we don't have a engagement with our legislators.
I wonder at some point, because you're doing so much work in terms of the state, whether that will ever reach the feds and whether it will ever be, state to state, that every state will have opportunities and have the same mindset around reducing stigma and understanding harm reduction.
So, I'll take a different example. Marijuana legalization is a great example of what's happened across this country. I would say within the next 10 years, most states will at least have a medical cannabis option if they don't have cannabis legalized. And why is that? Because the states are all saying, we need to change these systems over. This is not helping. This is hurting. Federally, though, it's a lot harder to do that. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the Biden administration will come up with. I hate to tell the listeners out there, but we are going to have a real serious problem on our hands with dealing with the amount of health issues that have come out of everything related to COVID. I think in order to do advocacy work well, you have to have a very long view. You can't give up after one bill doesn't pass. You really have to keep pushing forward and keep strategizing and keep telling the stories because you know what? It's about the people we serve. The stories make the difference. For example, we just had a participant end her life because she couldn't get access to treatment in time. She went to an emergency department, was withdrawing from drugs, and she had a 4-day wait to get into treatment, and she couldn't bear it. And she ended her life. How belittling to feel like, oh, there's no room for me. So yeah, and then we were able to take her story and talk to Senator Dick Durbin about it, who's our, one of our two senators here in Illinois. He's been around for a long time, and he then talked about it on the Senate floor. And it was one of the reasons why he was trying to push for the release bill that they're, arguing about in the Senate today. So these stories do matter. They're the reason why we need to keep moving forward.
This woman's legacy may open doors for others. I'm just really sorry that it took her life to be able to do that.
I've told my brother's story and my story hundreds, if not thousands of times. And we've made progress little by little by little by little. And it's a huge collaborative effort. And of course, not working in silos and all the things that we are trained to do as social workers.
You mentioned COVID a couple times, and I just want to know, what have you all been able to do given so much has shut down, and where do you see opportunities moving forward?
We really haven't stopped doing anything. We
Great.
took all of our peer support virtual, which actually we're going to have a hard time going back to in person because it has really removed barriers for a lot of people to be able to attend. We did stop going out in our mobile outreach unit for a little bit, and we're doing door drops. So we still do a lot of door drops of supplies. We have a very robust mail out program, but we've never stopped connecting with the
That's great.
participants.
I think sometimes we look at those who are on a journey so separate from the rest of the population, and it just simply isn't true. This impacts everyone. And I saw this when I started to first work in the HIV community. My friends would say, this doesn't affect you. And I thought, of course it affects me. It affects everyone. And you have to look at substance use in the same way, that when you have a less healthy society, it impacts every single person within that society. Our collective goal should be wellness, however that's defined. So I really appreciate both your philosophy, your approach, and now I have a really hard question. What are we going to do about the statistics that you're seeing? What are we going to do about it?
Oh my gosh. Well, I also, before we answer that, can I just say, like, we can't have these conversations anymore without talking about the racial injustice that has been imposed on Black and Brown and Indigenous communities since really the dawn of our country, but so much so with drug use. I mean, it's a shame to me, and I think to many Americans, that 1 in 3 Black men have been incarcerated or will be in their life. Like, that is a stark statistic. That Black mothers are dying incredible rates when they're giving birth because they're not getting the appropriate care and attention that a white mom like me might get. I did not walk into the hospital the day I delivered my son having one iota of fear that I would not be okay after that. I was completely prepared for whatever was going to come ahead of me. So I think one of the solutions is we just have to recognize these things. And that's a big problem in our country right now. Not everybody wants to acknowledge our history. Not everybody wants to look at data. Not everybody wants to hear what I have to say. Not everybody wants to watch a different news channel. So we have this problem of information and misinformation going on. We all need to be aware of these issues. And that privilege is a very real thing. The fact that I can come on a podcast and talk about this and not have a fear oriented around it is a gift. It really is a privilege.
Thank you. Thanks, Chelsea, for adding that piece. It is pivotally important because equity is something we don't recognize as a direction that we must take in order to create a healthier society. So, Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you.
We need federal dollars to be able to implement harm reduction programs in communities where they're most needed. We need to decriminalize personal use. We need to get rid of once and for all the stigma and the separation between good people and bad people. Bad people use substances, good people don't. I call bullshit on that because I've known a lot of very high level executives that use substances and they're good people. And I've known people that live under the viaduct that are very good people and are housing challenged and use substances. The stigma drives the shame that keeps people from getting help.
The idea that if we can do what you and Chelsea are suggesting, both in the programmatic way and in the awareness and in the equity and then the reducing shame, there will be less of a market to cut certain drugs with other drugs that almost creates certain death. There's a sub-market where people have exploited this and made a ton of money. And I think if we begin with compassion and destigmatizing and the exact area that you're going, that market will no longer exist.
You're 100% right. And I'm just going to give an example of another culture that has done this well.
Great.
Portugal, let's give a props to Portugal. They decided 20-something years ago to decriminalize all drugs when they were seeing this huge uptick in heroin-related deaths. Their government took an approach of, well, let's give more opportunities. Let's invest in people. Let's give them jobs, loans. Let's make sure they can get to their doctor. And since that time, their crime has been slashed. They don't have this market that we have here in the States, and I don't think they ever will. They didn't create a new market, right? They just removed a lot of the demand. The way that they did it was really thoughtful, and they've been tracking it and retooling it and refining it for the last 20 years. And they have very, very, very little death from overdose. They have very low addiction rates. So we are seeing how this is working in other countries. And I'm not going to go down the road of suggesting we legalize all drugs in this country, because that's another podcast and that's going to take another 2 hours. But what I will say is it's not working right now with the current mechanism. The Mexican drug cartels, they own us. They own our veins. They own this whole situation. They have figured out how to market. We are losing out because we haven't created a different scenario here. We have just kept slapping more Band-Aids on the bruise, and the bruise is not going away. So until our government decides to make drastic measures, it's not going to change. We're not going to see overdoses go down. We're not going to see funding come out of criminal justice systems of oppression and into systems that we know work. We're not going to see that. So I guess the short answer, we have to keep pushing for these types of changes to our policies.
Small and Gutsy is sponsored by the Intrinsic Group, my boutique management consulting firm specializing in guiding organizations to leverage talent, optimize processes, and to ensure the organization's narrative is aligned with their culture. We'd love to invite you to be a sponsor. So if you're interested in sponsoring Small and Gutsy to keep it going, please reach out to me at reachus@theintrinsicgroup.com. So as you both may know, toward the end of the podcast, I always ask quick and gutsy questions. First, and we may have already touched upon this, but I want to give you a chance to articulate it fully, is if you can't answer with money or funding, what is at the top of your wish list for LIVE4LALI?
Love and compassion.
I was going to say that.
You guys think
Her and I share a brain, you know.
I love it.
Love is all we need. And sadly, it's easier said than done for a lot of people.
If you were to think of a song that describes LIVE4LALI, what would it be? Chelsea, you're laughing, but I can hear your laughter through the mute.
Because I have this visual of the We Are the World song.
I love it.
And that's so cheesy. Okay, Laura, you go. I'm going to say the cheesy person in me thinks come together.
First one that comes to my mind is Bill Withers' Lean on Me.
Oh, I love that song.
And then Eye of the Tiger.
That's great. What makes your organization gutsy?
We do not take no for an answer. I don't even know what that word means. Thank my mom for that, for creating a very strong, independent young woman. No, we don't do no.
We talk about the hard things. We talk about people having the right to use substances. We don't shy away from the difficult things that people would rather turn their heads to. We meet them head on, and we are always, 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 always on the side of our participant.
I am not going to let somebody tell us that our work doesn't matter. When we hear one of our participants say, no, I don't want to do this, that we take that very, very seriously.
Oh, yeah. It's the way that I heard it also. But I really appreciate the clarification. What is something that outsiders or maybe even insiders don't know about LIVE4LALI?
We don't trust a lot of people. I hate to say that, but we are a family and we stick together and we have great partners in our community. We've also been burned a lot by the treatment world. We have seen some of the horrors of this issue. To sum that up, it's that we are a family. We are so loyal to the cause, and that we treat our organization like a grassroots organization should. Like, we care about each other and we love each other.
I think that sometimes outsiders who are substance users can't wrap their heads around the fact that we really do this. and that we really have no judgment, and that we really will give you as many rigs as you want, and that we really will sit with you while you're using just to make sure you stay alive. Because people who use substances are not used to trusting. You really can trust us.
So, my last quick and gutsy question. If you could get one celebrity or influencer to endorse or talk about Live for Lolly, who would it be?
I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say like Kim Kardashian, because I think she has like the most followers on Instagram.
Yeah.
I don't know actually if that's true, but we need lots and lots of people to know about the services that we provide, or one in their local communities.
Yes.
I think that would just make a world of difference. And I suspect that she's a reformer too because of all her advocacy work.
Laura, what about you? Great choice.
I go more towards the music world because music is very important to me. And if I could just get Eric Clapton to just say a few words.
Okay.
You know, he's a person in long-term recovery. He is very open about his heroin use. He started a treatment facility.
Another thing that occurred to me is what would be great about your organization, although small and very gutsy, could be replicated, or you could advise or consult so that there could be similar models if the state allows. I understand that restriction in other communities. And maybe over time, that's really, that's my wish for you all because you're doing incredible work.
We do a ton of consulting and just helping people who want to start a similar initiative. And they're like our buddies for life.
So
it's remarkable whenever anybody wants to do it. So we would never say no to helping another organization step this up, as has been so graciously given to us by other harm reduction and peer support organizations.
How can people reach you? How do they find Live for Lolly?
Well, you can go to our website, www.liveforlolly.org. Our phone number is 844-584-5254. Yeah, I think that's the best way. We have a contact us tab on our website. Someone will get back to you right away. We are also very active on social media, all platforms.
And it's Live with the number 4.
Yes, LIVE, the number 4, LALI.
I really want to thank you both for spending so much time with me and sharing the information that you have. And any last thoughts or comments? I really appreciate the time and the education for me personally and the opportunity to have a really open, honest conversation.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I think that we just want people out there to know that we may be based in Illinois, but we will help anybody anywhere. And it's no cost. I mean, you don't have to worry about that. We will help you no matter what. And that please don't be afraid. We are here for you. That's, I think, the last and final message. And also, if you have people that you know, people that you love in your community, like think about having a different conversation with them than you may have yesterday to help them and wherever they are in their journey.
I guess you are worth it. If you are out there, you're listening to this, you're wondering if you might have an issue, you don't know where to turn, you are worth whatever it is you need. Please carry naloxone. Everybody carry naloxone because without a heartbeat, recovery is impossible.
And if you are not in Illinois and you need naloxone, you can go to the Harm Reduction Coalition website, harmreduction.org. They have a naloxone locator on there, and they will point you to your local harm reduction organization or health department that's carrying it. Most local health departments have a naloxone program, and they're not going to make you pay for it.
Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends. Give us some stars and write a review on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts, or buy us a coffee. buymeacoffee.com/small and gutsy. Another shout out. Thank you for your work and for bringing attention to organizations making a social impact. Thanks, TB. We really appreciate that. And we really try to bring attention to these organizations. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, my co-producer, sound engineer, and composer, the amazing Pavel Franson, my exceptionally talented graphic designer, Nate Addy, my social work intern extraordinaire, Stephanie Tran. Please check out their bios on the Intrinsic website and all the folks, friends, and family who have guided and inspired me. Our blog of these small and gutsy nonprofits and social impact organizations can be found in the organizational stories section of the Intrinsic Group website. so that we can continue to link clients, volunteers, future employees, investors, and donors to this small but mighty network. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, so before you sign on to support or work for them, we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. We just want you to learn about the small and gutsy nonprofit and social impact organizational sector so they can spread their story and their impactful work. From small and gutsy to big with impact, I'm Laura Witkoff, and thanks for listening.